Hello, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of ABC24 This Week. I am your host, Pepper Baker. It is the relaunch show, and we are so happy to be back, and we're kicking it off real big. You're here for the real stories behind the big stories, and we are giving you just that. We have a familiar face to the show, born and raised Memphian Reverend Kenneth Whalum of New Olivet Worship Center, and our special guest joining us now, nationally acclaimed journalist Roland Martin. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Roland.
All right, so we are going to center this conversation about Roland Martin's recent comments on his visit to Memphis for the annual Memphis Juneteenth Freedom Luncheon. And that was at the Holiday Inn University of Memphis, organized by Dr. Talisa Franklin. Now, some Memphians say that Roland might have chosen violence that day, but some say that it was the wake-up call that Memphis may have needed. So I want to set it up a little bit. The first part of the speech I actually really loved, and I mean, honestly, the whole speech was very passionate, but the first part was more of your backstory of exactly kind of when TV One canceled News One Now, and you pivoted your career. You talked to media companies who didn't think that the black viewership was worth pursuing. They said there was a lack of black viewership, lack of a market there. So you took your career in your own hands, and now you have created the YouTube channel, Roland Martin Unfiltered. You've grown over the last 6.5 years to more than 1 million subscribers. And the one thing that is segueing into my first soundbite here was that you credited that to the collective black people collectively working together to build that viewership and prove those media companies wrong, that there is a market there. And so that was the first call out, I will say, of Memphis. So let's play this first soundbite from your speech.
At the table, I asked the question, what's the largest black-owned business in Memphis? Folk couldn't give me a name. That is a problem. And so I need us to understand that I'm not interested in the same old same. I'm not interested in another black mayor. I'm not interested in more black council members. I'm not interested in more black county commissioners. What I'm interested in is, what are you doing while you are there?
Okay, so clearly getting some reaction from the crowd there. You are talking to a city and a county that has a lot of black elected leaders in position. Both county and city mayors are black men. Again, on the commission and on city council, there's a lot there. So I want to open up with this first question. Let's get down to the specifics. What exactly do you mean by the same old, and what do elected leaders need to do differently than to change that status quo?
Again, I set it up by asking the question, can you name me the largest black-owned businesses in Memphis? And folks were absolutely perplexed. That's a fundamental problem. When you talk about black power, when you look at the Black Political Convention that took place in Gary, Indiana in 1972, that was about how do you leverage African Americans in political positions. So when you look at historically, when you look at Hatcher in Gary, Indiana, Stokes in Cleveland, Maynard Jackson in Atlanta, Marion Barry in Washington, D.C., when you look at Coleman Young in Detroit, you have that group of black mayors in the 1970s, 1980s who understood that political power is one thing, but it's economic power. Dr. King, if you look at, those 13 years of the Black Freedom Movement, many call it the Civil Rights Movement, he was actually talking about economics. And so the issue for me is, okay, we got black political power, but how are those people leveraging political power to drive things economically? And I don't mean social services. I mean contracts. I mean businesses. And so when you can't really answer that question, and again, the numbers are the numbers. If you said right now, what are the top 5 black-owned businesses in Memphis? What are they? How much in revenue are they doing? How many employees do they have? That's a legitimate question. And when I look at places like Houston and Detroit and Atlanta and Washington, D.C., look at places where you have significant black population, you see a much different black economic paradigm than you see in Memphis. And that's a problem when you have 62.5% of the city that's black.
Okay, Reverend Whalum, so you are the born and raised Memphian, former school board member, all of it. Your response?
Roland and I coalesce around this notion of black economic empowerment. In fact, that's how we met years ago. And he's absolutely right, especially when he brings up the point about Dr. King being assassinated here and coming here to help black folk. Roland has the bona fides from his years in Houston, his years in D.C., his years in Chicago, and he's a numbers person. So I really don't understand how anybody in Memphis who has Memphis at heart could object to what he said. Now, as a person who says what I mean all the time, I understand why people are upset with how he said it, but that doesn't bother Roland, it doesn't bother me, and the truth still remains. And the truth is that what he said is true, and I'm really concerned as to how we're going to get beyond that.
Okay, and that actually does set up the second point that I want to bring. That was kind of another call out when we talk about races and putting these people in these positions. Let's play the second soundbite of just how a lot of the elected campaigns and just the races go, if we can play that.
How in the hell you got races with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 black folk running? When if 10 run, 8 of them know they ain't got no shot whatsoever. If you don't understand how to amass power, then you don't know how to use power. That means sometimes y'all gotta have the courage to tell people, I need to sit your down. You don't need to run.
The reason why I think this is a relevant point here is because the past city mayor's race, a couple years ago now, this happened. There were a few black candidates running, and then it's also happening coming up as well with the Shelby County mayor's race. And this is history that's repeated itself in our area. So I want to open it to Reverend Whalum first.
Well, when Dr. Harrington was elected mayor, what happened around that time was there are several black candidates or potential candidates, and Roland is familiar with this. You had Harold Ford as a kingmaker. You had my dad as a kingmaker. You had Otis Higgs. You had others involved in the race, and my dad and others, Harold Ford, forced them to the table and said, look, one of y'all run, the others support. And that's how it happened. Historically, Roland can deal with it better than I can from a national perspective, but it's gonna happen again. I promised you before the show opened today that it's gonna happen again. It's gonna happen in the county mayor's race if something doesn't change in terms of how black people in Memphis see themselves.
So Roland, you mentioned if you don't know how to amass power, then you won't know how to use it. That is pretty powerful there. Yes, expand on that a little bit more. Expound on that for me.
Because it's ego. Because it's ego. Listen, why is Atlanta called the Black Mecca? Because Maynard, Andrew Young, Maynard, Bill Campbell, Shirley Franklin, Kasim Reed, Keisha Lance Bottoms, Mayor Andre. You have had uninterrupted black leadership as the mayor of Atlanta. Now, Chicago, for the first time, you've had back-to-back black mayors because black folks in Chicago were playing a democratic political machine game and not exercising political power. But you will look at Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., very similar to Atlanta, when you had black mayors repeatedly. Detroit, when they had, of course, they had a series of black mayors, and then Dugan wins because you had folk there who were totally screwing up. Now you're likely going to see a return to a black mayor there. And so I can walk you through numerous cities, and when you do that, you have people who are leveraging that particular power. Listen, when Maynard Jackson became the mayor of Atlanta, black people were getting 0.0012% of all city contracts. 0.0012. Now, his grandfather told him there are 3 B's that are important: the ballot, the book, and the buck. Maynard Jackson combined the ballot and the buck together. And so he made clear, Atlanta Airport, it ain't getting expanded without black participation. He said tumbleweeds will roll down runways before I allow this to happen. He forced banks in Atlanta to put blacks on their boards. He changed the rules when it came to contracts, breaking up large contracts into smaller contracts so African Americans can have a position. So what that means is you have to have people who are running for office who have a real agenda for change. If you running just to be running, that's your ego. And what are you doing with it? And that means that if you got somebody black who is the county mayor or the mayor of the city, and they are not delivering, then you replace them with somebody else. But this really is, listen, this is the United States of America. And if you're not having a money conversation, you're not having an American conversation. And the reason Memphis, really black Memphis, looks the way it is because you have not had a leveraging of political power into economic power. The attorney there in Memphis, matter of fact, I did not know until I actually sent him a text. I did not know he had passed away a couple of years ago. Ricky Wilkins and I were talking about that over the last several years before his passing in 2023. Some of the things about economics. That's what King was talking about. People need to stop reciting the mountaintop part of his sermon, which is the bottom 2 minutes, and go read the other 41 minutes. He talked about economics. He talked about businesses not doing business with us and we don't spend our money with them. He talked about collective economics. He talked about preachers being more concerned about the people and not themselves. King left black America and left Memphis with an economic plan on April 3rd, 1968 at Mason Temple, and too many black leaders are not following it.